and Larp communities in crisis and how to manage that or mitigate that or basically just even deal with that in the best possible way. I am going to have everyone do a quick introduction of themselves, and then we'll go into questions. If you want to say kind of, what maybe communities you are also associated with, to give people an idea of what we might be talking about in reference to here. If that's something you want to do, go right ahead. I'll start though. I'm moderating this panel. My name is Kate Hill. I am from North Carolina. I am one of the people helping run Larp Shack, which is our local gaming group down there. And I am really excited to moderate this panel. I have been at the edge of a lot of communities in crisis and dealt with the fallout of it, but not directly involved in it. So I'm really interested to hear what these people these awesome community organizers have to say about this topic. So,
I'm Dave Kapell, PM. I'm involved with the Neil and Intercon stuff primarily. I do a number of local LARPs as well. Play in a number of local LARPs as well, but I've not organized things outside of that context. I don't know. I have been attached to the Intercon safety stuff for about a decade now. I've been part of the groups responsible for writing the policy and then implementing and dealing with incident reports and management, making recommendations and taking action for much of that time.
Cool, awesome. I'm Maury Brown, and I come to game design after a couple of careers that are adjacent. The first one that's potentially most relevant for this panel is I started in corporate communications, corporate PR. That I've done was a communications and media relations and crisis communications executive for Capital One, and then for the director of a K-12 school district. So in terms of, I bring that training, also being a professor of communication studies and rhetoric, into the gaming community and trying to put some of those best practices that were in use, particularly as the gaming, particularly as LARP moves a bit from a hobby into more of an industry, and then trying to bring those standards in. I am the co-founder of New World Metascola and the president of Learn LARP, and the communities associated with those events.
So I'm Casey Hardy. I'm the other half of this dynamic duo. My husband Kevin and I run a great big old Boffer LARP down in the southeast called Shadowmoor. It's in its 21st year. It's part of a larger community that's hitting its 26th year. So we've had our share of crises in the community, and as the game organizers, we're usually involved in making sure that that's managed well at our level and doesn't cause more community fallout. So we'll come with a little bit of recent experience about how we've intentionally and tried to thoughtfully handle some of the crises that we've gone through recently.
Ditto.
I'll try not to talk over you.
You do something. Hi, I'm Nathan Black. I'm the community coordinator for Big Bad Con, and I also do some work with Juegos Rancheros, which is an indie video game collective in Austin, Texas.
great, thanks everyone. So I'm going to start with a hard question because I'm mean. So my actually question is, when we talk about crisis, what are we actually talking about here? Like, how are we what are we defining a crisis as in a community? You know, so we all have kind of a same baseline, and also understand each other's definitions here. Also, I guess I'm an academic, so I'm always like, let's define this.
I don't know if it's a term that I've actually really used for our stuff. Because we're primarily a convention, we end up with incidents and reports and that sort of thing, and we don't really have, hopefully, we have not had a thing which I would necessarily refer to as a crisis in this.
That's because you're newer.
Yeah, we're only. Yeah, that's fair. Yes. But I don't know that we've had, even in the history of the con, we've had a safety-related crisis that is threatened to split the community.
But I think that for me, so I would also say that for me in this thing, I am referring to also non-safety related crises. So crises of organizational difference, anything that would cause a split in the community.
Yeah. So, so crisis is, you don't say that it's something that's unexpected or unplanned for, because you should try to actually plan for and expect these things that could happen, that you don't want to have happen, but they are things that will adversely affect your community or your event. A tornado might come through, right? It did, 90 minutes into my first event. Yeah. So what is your plan for when these things happen? You might have someone get injured or sick or become unresponsive at one of your events. That's a crisis. What do you do in that case? And how do you communicate about it? You might have something where there is an argument among factions of your community that puts your community in crisis, because instead of then being holistic and caring about the game or the world that you're building, they're fighting with each other as people. There might be a crisis of safety, physical or emotional, or you might have assault or any of these sorts of things. They're all crises that can hit you. Your venue might close or have a problem. I just had that with Beat Generation. We showed up for the venue that I had rented, and the New York Housing Authority had shut it down, and we had to go to within an hour locate and move to this other thing before the event started. You didn't know that, did you?
I did not know that.
Yeah. So crisis communities in crisis is all communities will have them, and you want to kind of think through what kind of crises you might have, and then know what to do when you have them. So
I would disagree a little bit that it's something that's unplanned. Like, I think all crises are unexpected. Crises are unexpected. It doesn't mean they have to be unplanned for. But something that's generally unexpected in the moment, something that has the potential or definitely is very divisive or breeds chaos, and something turns from an incident into a true crisis if it is uncontrolled or ungoverned and you don't have something in place to catch it. So you can quickly turn a crisis into something that's not a crisis if you have a plan in place. It's when you don't have a plan in place that you really enter that space of fear and lack of clarity, and something that can spin out of control because it has become a community issue and not an issue of tooling or resources or communication or something else.
agreed. Crises need to be contained.
Yes, very much so. And of course, being down here in the end, they've already had such really great answers.
I got something.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll start with you on the next one.
Yeah, see, I was gonna say, like, people can jump in. We don't need to go like order.
I deal mostly with communities and organizations on the organizational level. A lot of the incident reports are crises, either immediate or dealing with traumas of the past, and how you mitigate that, how you deal with that as a community says a lot about your community, and it also says a lot about the values of the organization. So I view crises from the organizational standpoint, or like breaches of code of conduct as a form of crisis, because it doesn't affect, it's not just, okay, here's this problem, let's take care of it. That has a problem that ripples across the community.
Like something went wrong, something unintended happened.
Yeah.
That is a form of crisis. How big that becomes depends on how you deal with it.
Well, and also even
Speaks
asking
to
someone not to attend has an effect. Has an effect on how you're perceived, how they react to it, how well they react to it, how poorly they react to it.
How well you come at that conversation to begin with.
Yeah, all of that is crisis management.
Agreed.
I'm so excited. This panel's going to be really smart, full of really smart people. I'm very excited. I will also say to you all, point of order, if you have questions that you want to ask, please just at any point raise your hand. I'm going to prioritize your questions over my questions because you're the people listening to us talk. So please keep that in mind. I will keep going if people don't have questions, but please. Yes.
Okay. So
Gave him permission and done. Yes.
So just real quickly, my name's Taylor. I'm a former domestic violence interventionist working with abusive men to correct their beliefs about personhood and all that. My question for you, and I say this not having a good answer, do you have any practical strategies for dealing with an abuser doing damage control?
You mean someone who's an abuser in a position of
What I
implementing
mean
control?
is that someone who has
think I
engaged
know
in abusive behavior or bullying behavior and is now risking exposure because
get
the relationship or whatever just came to an end or something, and they're doing damage control to
help themselves.
Right, to help themselves
And to get them ahead of the narrative.
not be perceived as someone who has committed abusive behavior.
Oh, it happens all the time.
Do
yeah.
you have practical strategies for identifying that?
Yeah. I mean, this is common.
Yeah.
It's extremely common because, first of all, it is very difficult for someone to accept that something that they have done could have been harmful. And so sometimes their knee-jerk reaction is to deny, and then they don't want people to think badly of them, and so they try to start. A lot of people vague book about it, a lot, very sort of passive-aggressively vague book, in which case you don't get involved in that, right? But then there are the folks who literally start attempting to harm the people that they think accused them. So very recently, in last December, we had a person who accused a Canadian who then screenshotted private conversations and put medical records and all sorts of other things into a dossier that he was going to use to prove his own supposed innocence, that was completely outing all of these private information of the person who had brought forth the report. So what was happening there was we had to encourage people not to share that and not to link to it, and to, if there were spaces that we could control, to take it down, to not give credibility to it. But depending on legal positions that are here, if the person is someone who was one of your former staff members or things, you can get into trouble for libel if you start saying certain things online or in official communications. But there are ways to you can simply state that this did happen. We had to, you want practical strategy from the organization's perspective?
Or anyone to identify, is this damage control happening?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And thereby, because one of the things that is also really common for abusers, or for people engaging in abusive behavior, generally, and while doing damage control, is to adopt victim stance.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes. Yeah.
And so we have a practice, and I'm not questioning or doubting this, of always believe the victim.
Yeah.
Well, some abusers are very, very good and adept at presenting themselves as a victim. How do we deal with that?
So,
Well,
go ahead, and then then I have
The
an
couple
article.
instances that I've already had to deal with has been number one is kind of getting out ahead of the problem. If I have identified the problem relationship or problem individual problem player, is having that conversation up front and I understand that you're going through something right now that is outside of our game system, but now is bleeding into our game system because either you or someone else is part of a relationship that is in some ways crumbling, falling apart due to actions. But having that conversation, and that's a hard conversation to have, to come up to someone else and say, we need to talk, and I hate that phrase, but it's a conversation that has to happen. It has to be frank, it has to be open, it has to be honest, And I'm definitely going to say that working with preschoolers has helped me be ready to have that conversation with adults. And it's so hard.
Like, I think like that's great if you have already identified
Right.
who is committed some kind of violation and who is
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
But if you are not able to identify that, and all you have is this big mess, what do you do?
I mean, so this is a point that I had made in this morning's panel of be willing to do the work and give yourself the flexibility to be able to do the work. It takes a lot of work to untangle that, but set up your policies, set up your event in a way that if somebody comes to you with an issue, you don't have a immediate guideline. You don't have an immediate well, they said this, so we have to take this action.
Right.
Put yourself in a position, and it is more work, but put yourself in a position where if somebody comes to you, you have to look into it. You have to do the legwork to determine what. I don't know. I don't want to say the truth of the matter because that's basically impossible. But
But
getting more information and getting the story before you make a decision, before you take action. I mean, obviously, if there's immediate harm, take action to stop the immediate harm. But before you make any long-term changes,
Are you asking, how do I find out if people are saying bad things about my community, or if people are
No.
threatening people in my community? Are you
No.
asking,
No.
if people are saying these things, what do you do? Which
I'm
one are you?
I'm
He's
asking,
saying that people are pretending that people who are abusers are acting as victims.
Yes.
They've already hurt people and they're getting the rest of the community on their side.
Okay.
How do you stop that?
Are they
How do you
banned from your
identify
Are they
that?
banned from your community already?
Maybe not.
I'm not going to divulge any of that.
Oh, okay. All right. I just because that would affect
But-
does affect how you would behave about it. Yeah.
One big red flag I look for is, do they take any responsibility for any of their actions?
Yep.
That's
Mhm.
huge. Anytime I've sat down with someone and had the conversation, if they have been bad actors, well, okay, you always have the conversation with someone you know to have been a bad actor. If they say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm working on my problems. I acknowledge that I've done that and I want to be better," that is the best sign you can get. If they say, "So-and-so's
Immediate defensiveness.
well, I mean, it's natural to feel defensive, but if they don't take any, it's happened a number of times, if they don't take any responsibility for their actions, we don't need them in the community. We definitely don't need them in the community. But if they say, "Oh my God, you're right, I'm so sorry, I'm working on it, I will, here's how I'm working on it," that's someone who's acting in good faith.
That word is really important. That phrase, good faith, is very important. And I think the specific incident we're thinking of came to a head of, it's impossible for us to verify that these things have happened because it happened outside of our community and we can't get involved in things that are outside of that. However, understanding that both or all involved parties have feelings and their experience is their own experience, and that we cannot make judgments about that, here's what we need all of the community members involved to do. One, acknowledge that there's even an appearance of something being improper and that perceptions are going to be perceptions. Two, regardless of whether you feel you're at fault or not, here are the steps we need you to take to demonstrate that you're going to be a better person than anyone who's accusing you of being bad. And three, how would you like to contribute to this? And if the response you get is, no finger point, then we've asked you to take a step to help correct a larger community issue, and you have indicated that you're not really involved in that, so that means that you're not a good fit for the community at this time. But we gave you the opportunity. We gave everyone the same opportunity. You kind of outed yourself. But it's trying to approach it from an angle of restorative justice maybe, or assuming that good intent will out itself, and where that's not being supported by the individuals involved, then you have a good clue that that's not going to continue to go in a good direction. It's not saying we have documentation, we have records, we have all these things. I'm making a judgment call myself based on that. I'm making a judgment call based on whether all the involved individuals are committing to take steps to improve the situation going forward.
And if you're talking about the hearsay and the people that are on one side or the other side, or that you fear that your community is actually now a crisis of faith for you, you made a decision to take action against this person, and now all these other people are like, they've made a bad decision, they were showing favoritism, this guy is above reproach, look how he's been victimized by this community, right? Those sorts of things. That is very real. It happened to us. Very strongly. And so I have an article called 19 Truths About Harassment.
I think I've seen
Yeah.
this.
And so there's a few things that you can say to the community that you have to just sort of repeat over and over again. Things like, actually, false reports are really, really rare. Really rare, right? Fear of reprisal for making a report is huge, right? These things, you will never, these are real things. You will. There is some information you will just never know. Right? You need to be understanding that there are some things that you'll just never know, that your experience is not everyone's experience. You may have had only positive interactions with this person, but that does not negate the possibility of the truth of the other things. So you can telling the community these sorts of things also can help get people to start to rationalize, because what's happening is cognitive dissonance. Is they're like, how can this be true? Because it is against the experience that I have had. And so and then at the same time they begin to feel unsafe, because if they had trusted the person and then to believe that the person is capable of these other things, then they were retroactively unsafe. And then that recognition of that is causing them to go and also become complicit. Yeah,
And also retroactively complicit.
They feel like they should have noticed, or they should have done something, and now they've so.
I also like to give the person I'm sanctioning an out whenever possible, and let them save face. Let them just walk away. Put them in rather, if it's possible to not make a public announcement, and Neil, for example, doesn't make public announcements of bannings. If you say, hey, Dave, who's been banned from Intercon because you're a member of the Neil community, because you've attended an event, I'm required to tell you that. But we don't announce that. So when we ban someone, we're putting them in a position where they're not welcome, but we're not going to tell anyone that. We're not going to go out of our way. They don't have to respond to that. They don't have to defend themselves, because we're not attacking them in a public way. We're not theoretically, we're not getting their hackles up. We're not gonna, and that has worked well for us to not have people push back, because we said, look, if you just stop responding, you're not going to be embarrassed.
Yeah.
I've got two questions or comments, and then I'm just going to let us move on.
Okay, yeah.
So I think one particular challenge with this that I know from my professional experience is that abusers doing damage control will first go to their closest, most personal friends.
Yep.
The people most likely to believe them, which means that as an organization, one of the challenges is that if you're dealing with damage control, it's absolutely coming from some of your closest friends. And that is an enormous complicating factor. And another data point that was shared with me by a domestic violence advocate lawyer who works with ongoing harassment after the end of a relationship. And I don't know how to reconcile this damage point, but according to them, statistically speaking, one of the most common behaviors of an abuser doing damage control is false reporting.
Oh, gotcha.
So there's a nuance to the discourse about reporting that I don't think has been explored. While I do absolutely believe that victims are very unlikely to false report, I think that there is evidence that suggests that abusers do false report.
There is evidence to suggest that, absolutely. And there's absolutely a thing of retaliatory reports. There's absolutely, yes, we're dealing with that. I would just throw one more thing out, which is being Facebook friends or with somebody is also a somewhat contentious thing now, because it becomes an implicit endorsement. So if someone's trying to figure out if someone is okay or if this thing is true, and they're like, well, all these people that I trust are still friends with them, and that can be something that's leveraged by abusers. Sadly, they cultivate that.
We had a question over here. Yes.
When it comes to having that difficult conversation with an abuser, how do you reconcile explaining, for example, in my case, I'm the general manager of a campaign officer, and I've had a situation where it comes time to ask someone not to return to your game, and that conversation becomes muddied by the fact that explaining all of the circumstances that have informed your decision will implicitly, not even implicitly, will explicitly reveal the victim.
Yeah,
in the
so you can't.
situation.
Yeah.
How do you have that conversation but still protect the victim? Because as far as we're concerned, we're very much, we believe the victim, we protect the victim, but it's hard to have that conversation.
And I was actually asking, like, how do we balance the needs for transparency and in these, and also in that kind of both that kind of thing, and also to our community, how do we balance the needs of those kinds of transparency with what we need to do to protect people, their consent, and even legality? So yes,
In a lot of those instances that I've already seen, they know what they've done wrong and who they've done wrong to. You don't even. Most of the time, I don't even need to say a name at all. Just a person, and like that's all I need. We are not the American justice system. I don't have to prove your innocence, and I know that's very harsh to someone who is a bad actor. I don't need to prove your innocence here. This is, especially when it comes to the point of banning, you got to that point, I don't need to do that. You're no longer welcome in my community. Yeah.
They definitely know who they've been shitty to.
Yeah.
In the case in the case that she's bringing up is like, yes, it is all known, but it's one of those like weird, like we can't say it, but they can say it on.
Well,
so one situation I dealt with, someone else brought the problem to our attention. Someone else brought the problem to our attention, and they were sure it was their horrible ex, the bad breakup. And I was like, and they were like, was it so and so? And I was like, one, fuck you. And two, it was a soft ban at first. It was a, please don't come this year. We're still evaluating. How you react to this will determine if you're ever welcome back. They are never welcome back. They went to circuitous routes to contact their ex. They behaved very poorly. Endless ranty emails.
They didn't demonstrate good faith in that, right?
Right.
Well, it wasn't even a question of good faith at that point. It was, for the love of God, don't do this thing.
Yeah.
And they just went ahead and did it.
We had one of those as well, where we had a situation where we had to we warned somebody, please. There was a cross-reporting thing, or some retaliatory reporting, perhaps. And one of the people who said, stop trying to contact this person, and directly or through others, and then a year and a half later, they reached out to someone to say, hey, can you reach out to this person, like to apologize to them? And then the person that we told them not to contact pinged me, was like, I've been having a panic attack for a day because of this situation, which is specifically the thing that we asked not to. And I was, at that point, president of Neil, so I just banned the guy which we had warned for directly violating the exact words. Like, they were in bold in the email that it was like, do not try to contact this person. I understand you've tried to contact this person. You are not welcome at that point. It's Intercon R and Living Games.
And speaking of documentation,
They're not banned permanently.
just for dates.
But for the two events that were planned at the time. But yeah.
Like,
Those
face-to-face conversations have to happen, but having secured your back end with and it's almost a form by now, right? Yeah. And it's like,
on this date.
You are not welcome back. Period. End of story.
So,
Sign game owners.
I think there were kind of two questions in your question, which is one, what do you do between the accused and the accuser, and dealing with that situation and having that face-to-face conversation of, you did. I'm not going to say names. But there's the also crisis fallout portion of it's very likely that these people are known in your community. It's very likely that everybody else kind of knows what's going on, or there's a non-zero circle of people that have been involved in this discussion before it ever got to you. And now you're going to take some kind of final action, and you have to get out ahead of what will inevitably happen, which is so-and-so, they were doing favorites, blah, blah, blah. And you have to consider, especially in a big old Whopper LARP, you know, there are new people who are just entering your community. They're going to see this, and they're going to get everybody else's opinions. The way that we have chosen to handle this in the past is have direct conversations with everyone who is involved. You know, we've gone through all the steps of attempting to let everyone demonstrate good faith and resolve issues, and we've come to the point where this is not going to get solved by assuming everyone is operating in good faith. Take the action to get the bad actor out of the community. Within 10 or 15 minutes of taking that action, because we've prepped, go to the rest of the community and say in a very kind and understanding way of saying, we know there are going to be feelings and fallout about this. We're not going to name any names. Please don't get involved if you're not already involved. If you want to have direct discussions with the people who were involved, that's between you and them, but we consider this matter to be handled on our end. This is how it's going to be closed. Please be kind to other people who are having feelings about this and give this a chance to die down. If there's something else that you need to bring up to the management or the safety team, we're here for you, but let's not make this into a big thing. So kind of setting the expectations for the rest of the community so they know if they become part of continuing to stir up the thing, they may also get a conversation, right? So we kind of package up a response plan before we enact the response plan so that there's not a lot of time for fallout to begin to occur without some sort of expectation being set.
That's very helpful.
It's not a fun thing to have to do, and it's not a fun thing to say like, oh, we haven't done this enough that we kind of have a template, and people are going to know what's up when we do this, but it's more helpful than not having a plan going.
Yeah, I would say the same thing there, but and also you have even more trouble if the person is a member of your staff.
Yes, and that is a specific thing I'm referencing. It has been in the past.
Because then you actually are dealing with some like liability because they were a member of your staff.
May I actually place a real quick follow-up question on that? Like, are you not, like, because the situation we're talking about, like, one of the reasons why we feel like, are you not liable if that person is not part of your staff?
Your sexual molestation, and do you have a separate policy? Because, like, we do.
We have a specific policy regarding, like, when allegations of sexual assault and harassment and any form of abuse are brought forward to our staff.
No, I mean a separate insurance policy. I have so
the answer is no. Yes.
Yeah,
no.
so we do. Because partially because some of the venues that we rent from require it, but also just because. Because your general liability insurance safety policy does not cover that.
It's an option, but it's
much more expensive.
Prohibitively expensive option.
I agree. I know. Yes, I know. Yeah. No, I've had $2 million, $3 million for sexual harassment and assault. But if you have employed someone, you are even more liable because they are, you have hired them. You were supposed to have vetted them. This is why it's an issue with like Magic the Gathering and some of the tournaments and the things that were happening there at cons. Because there's an assumed vetting process, and then there's bits of employment law and fair labor standards and all these other things that begin to come into play if you have to dismiss a staff member, and that restrains what you can say even further. So,
which a lot, I was going to say, which a lot of people, having been a part of that, one of those situations, a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah.
Especially in the Larp community. I'm jumping in as an actual, sorry, I'm a moderator, but I'm saying, but a lot of people, like, as a community member watching this fall out, a lot of people don't understand that because they view Larp as a volunteer thing and not as a business or any kind of a thing, and so they just don't get what that distinction is.
So, as an example, we had to shut down some discussion that happened in one of our large Facebook groups because of the legal liability, since it was a moderated space that was owned by us. If those people were having that discussion on their own walls or on their own things, but what looked like to the community was we're shutting down discussion, and therefore we don't want to have, let people talk about it. And it was like, no, we want you to talk about it. You guys are a community, but you can't talk about it here, right? To go, but
and you had a question.
Yeah.
Your background is crisis communication. Are you familiar with Dr. Kapell's work?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, he's amazing work. If you have a chance to look him up, he talked about in his crisis response plan making sure that if you're you come up with a plan for your most common scenarios that might happen, and then he has something like designed like 30 questions, the top 30 questions that could be asked by the press or parents, in my case, some parent, or your membership for each one of those scenarios, and have those answers planned out. That sounds like a lot of work, but if you have that laid out, it can be imperative for you when it's the fan.
I would argue you should do that. I have a big binder, but I come from crisis communication, so I actually had the death of a student letter, right? And the and those sorts of things, because it's a horrible. I had to use it. I was picking apples on a Sunday, and I get a phone call, and so having that also, because when you're in crisis, right, like having these templated things and things are very helpful. We are making this up a lot as a Larp community, and a lot of us are making it up simultaneously, and so I'm really happy that Casey proposed this panel, because it's a way to get cross communication.
The other thing he says, to break down your response, especially for the press or anyone else, and the first thing is to express compassion to the people who are going through this. The second thing is to talk about the actions you're taking, and the third is to end with optimism. We will rise above this situation, and that's your 3 basic points. Every single statement you make should have those 3 points in it, and it's been successful for us even on a much lower level, because we're very lucky.
Well, but in the case of making communication like this, a lot of times your goal is to start to give you the rest of your community the tools to move forward. Yeah, you're saying something about the actions that you're taking, and you're kind of making a final word, but you know that the discussion's not going to stop there. So if you set the tone, first person in the room often gets to do that, and that's why I recommended have your plan and drop the bomb. Go, so that you're not scrambling 2 days later to say, oh yeah, I guess we need to make a community announcement too. The thing happened, news will spread far faster than you can control it if you do not do it kind of simultaneously.
I think it's Mark Twain that says that a lie can travel halfway around the world while you're still figuring out the truth. But I think in the age of the internet, it can travel around the world 10 times.
Okay, who's gone? I was like,
was
I think
Mark.
Nat had a question. Yes.
So I wanted to ask about information sharing between organizations. There is obviously
Everyone's getting my questions.
reasonable, there's a completely justified desire to protect everybody's privacy in the incident response. But at the same time, there's I think also a completely justified desire to protect other communities from a person who might hop over there. So how do you balance that?
So I have feelings about this. There's that concept of a whisper net, and then there's also the real legal liability of things like slander that you might have to deal with, and we've tried to balance it. There are communities that are reaching out to us to say, hey, we're trying to proactively protect our communities. Is there anything that we should watch out for? And then there are also situations where we want to make sure that everyone just kind of knows, even if we don't think it's going to be an issue for them, just kind of here's a general decision we made, and here's the general reason why. Heads up. I don't know if we're always handling it well, but I think that we have to treat our community as a community and say we need to give you the tools to manage your own environment. We don't want to proactively blacklist anybody, but for example, if we had to ban a community member for doing something that was definitely inappropriate within our own community, but we think it was highly specific, like this was these 2 people and they did not get along and we just weren't able to manage it, the behaviors that they exhibited, we'll make sure to kind of give an overview of that. You know, it ended up being very abusive or contentious, and they were spreading rumors, but they were exemplary members of our community before then, and we don't want to proactively blacklist it. Please just be aware of this. It's not a perfect thing, and there's a lot of legal liability. And if your friend comes to you and says, hey, I run this Larp over here, I heard you guys banned so-and-so, can you give me the lowdown? We have to handle that really carefully. But I don't think the right response from us would be we can't talk about that at all. That person doesn't exist. Yeah. You know, there's a line. It's just like kind of having someone call you and ask, hey, did this person work at your company? Legally, you're allowed to say yes or no.
And here's their start date, and here's their end date.
Right. So you could say, like, yes, we asked them not to participate in our community. Yes, we felt that the reasons were very worthwhile. Yes, you may want to be aware that there was a problem here, and you guys might want to watch out for bad behaviors in the context of your community.
So, yeah.
Nathan and I had that exchange of glances.
So if someone comes to me as someone that worked at Big Bad Con and says, is so-and-so okay? And they weren't, I can talk about the actions they took with us.
Yes.
I can say, we asked them not to attend, and then they behaved very poorly and exacerbated the problem, and now they are no longer ever welcome again.
Yeah, there is
Yeah,
that line of,
specificity.
I can't talk about the things that they were accused of and all of that, but I can say, we asked them to take steps X, Y, and Z, and they did F, R, and Q. And F, R, and Q were definitely not okay, so this is why we asked them to leave.
Yeah, and I can definitely say they are not welcome back
Yes.
for strong reasons.
Yes. Yeah. And so, I mean, if I had my druthers, we would have some sort of clearinghouse that if there were incident reports from one place, that there would be, they wouldn't give it specifics, but it would be, this person has had an incident reported against them 11 times. Right?
There's something going on there.
Yes,
Yeah.
you know. And so, like, but there are some legal issues. It is happening now, though. They have software that's being developed that's being brought onto multiple college campuses that is allowing information sharing between college campuses, because we've had people just in Charlotte. I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia, and we had basically a serial killer who had gone to Christopher Newport University and had sexually assaulted a student there, and then gone to Liberty University and sexually assaulted a student there, and then come to James Madison University. He was a football player, and so he kept getting moved, sexually assaulted a student there, and then sexually assaulted and murdered a woman in Charlottesville. And there was no information sharing between those, because it was just like, yes, they attended the university, and there didn't used to be things in place where now there's actually, if there was a criminal charge filed against them, they have to share it with the other university. That was able to pass in law. But this new software is also saying if someone made a report, and then it's like of these sorts, and you can anonymize it or not anonymize it. But then what happens is that person gets in, there's been a report. You at least know there has been a report of this nature. If I had my druthers, we would do something like that for Larp, because I call it a mobile missing stair, right? Because missing stairs typically were in a house, right? And you could deal with them, and you all dealt with them your specific way. But now that we're having cross-pollination of Larp communities and international Larps, you have somebody who is traveling from one to the other and exhibiting the same sorts of behavior. They get to one community and they get busted and they break out, and then they go to another. So one of the people that we had to remove from our community, turns out, has been when I removed him, had been removed from 2 other communities that I did not know about, and then was like, okay, so I'm the 3rd now, and of course now it's even more, because that's what was happening. Was I finished with this community because I got in trouble, so now I'll go to a new community, and so that's very real and sad. But and scary and quite scary. And so there are patterns of behavior that you can look for that these sort of serial abusers do. They try to ingratiate themselves with the staff. They try to make themselves indispensable to the game. They talk about how much they give and give and give to the games. They insert themselves into lots of people's often will show lots of compassion and get ways to get people alone at the games. They want to make sure that they get the influencers in the community who would say that they were awesome. So they actually do great gifty things or positive interactions with people who they have identified as people who would vouch for them. I'm sorry, it's very scary, but it's very, very real. And if you have one of those like sort of serial abusers that's coming into LARP, and the worst part of it is they use the alibi of role play to commit assaults.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
TLDR, they're real good solutions, but
So I will tell, and I just like what they're doing. You can say, yes, I removed them. Yes, I did. And then also make a report to my community. So now you have a thing that somebody made a report to my community. I didn't just get hearsay or whatever. If someone said something to you, say, make a report.
And that's why we make a really big effort to ensure that even if we've had a conversation with someone at an event where we're out in the woods with no electronics, we follow up proactively over some sort of system of record to say, we're just following up on that conversation we had with you on site about these things, and here were the expectations we communicated to you. So that there's no way for them to say, oh no, they didn't tell me about that. Like, we definitely did, and here's our record.
And it's not bad-mouthing or libelous to say, yes, this person attended. No, this person is no longer welcome.
That's true.
Do not fear. Do not be afraid you will get sued for saying those things.
And also, I think part of that, the usefulness of that is that if people are coming to you or you're going to other people, it's probably because they're looking for your trusted input on this other person. So they're going to trust what you tell them. Even if you can't go into detail, if you say, we asked them not to attend for very good reasons, if you trust my judgment on that, then that may be all you need to know. But I don't have to say any more than that, and I'm not allowed to. But there was our judgment on the matter, and we vetted it through the community, and we're confident in our decision.
Yes.
So if I could ask about a very different kind of crisis. So
Yes.
I've come through at least 5 existential crises in LARP or LARP-adjacent communities. Most of them have been because of disagreements about the identity, values, or organization of the community. And I'd kind of be interested in thoughts on how to handle that sort of situation, where people just don't fundamentally come to the point of not agreeing what the game that you're playing is.
We have a policy for that.
I love it.
We want people who are involved in our community to be involved in a community that they enjoy. Communities change over time. Populations change over time. Social values change over time. But we're ultimately, if we're going to be spending so much of our lives and energy as staff or as involved members or as players of the group, there comes a point when you have to say this is the direction that we're going. And we completely understand that this is no longer the direction that you want to participate in. And we will do everything we can to help you find another community that you are happy being in, but this is non-negotiable. And if it comes to the point where nobody wants to be involved in our community anymore, then it has run its course. And
That is a very specific mantra that I have with the community is, I want you to have fun and enjoy the game. But if you can't enjoy it with me, I'll help you find a place that you can enjoy it. And I'm going to wax a little theologic here.
Preacher.
I'm an old school Baptist. And part of that is the autonomy of the local church. And I don't know if you know what this means, but it means is that as an individual believer within this context, it's your responsibility to find a body that fits your belief structure. And that's not Baptist today. That's old. But I'm a very firm believer in that if I may not be the game owner for you, but let me help you find the game that you fit into, and I'll do that.
or if you got to start your own, no hard feelings.
Yeah, we send people to. We've got several smaller games near us. It's like, you might have fun there. Here's a list of places that you might enjoy, because I don't want you to be miserable with me. Definitely don't.
And create misery.
Yeah, it's okay if the community splits.
On
Right.
the other end
Like-
of that spectrum, I've worked the door of a bar that has, very clear policy on the front: no sexism, no homophobia, no xenophobia, and I have the advantage of being able to go, hey, if this isn't for you, there's a bar there, there's a bar there, there's a bar there. Try one of them.
I mean, and we have that in New England. It's very, for LARP, it's very convenient. I cannot count the number of LARPs we have in this area, so
Yeah.
probably one of them is what you're looking for, even if it's not ours.
Our bar says all are welcome, but the subtext is, but we're not for everybody.
Right.
I think camera person had a
Yeah,
question.
Yeah.
you
One
have your
there,
hand
one
up.
there.
So
Because we have 20 minutes.
Okay.
my role in my community is on the best days emotional confidant, and on the worst days emotional dump truck. I get a lot of people coming to me with issues about abuse, and even like mid-level issues that aren't strictly broken stair, but they're like, you know, they're a problem. And they don't want to report because they're afraid of the consequences on them. They're afraid that they don't necessarily want that person, you know, kicked out in retaliation, all this different stuff that they're, like, multiple people come to me are very worried about. How do you guys as organizers kind of mitigate that effect? How, you know, stuff like that. How do you get
work?
I don't want to say the word victim, I hate the word victim, but people with an issue comfortable enough to be able to say, hey, heads up, this is a thing.
Proven track record of doing the right thing over a period of time. Like, have a code of conduct which says how you're going to do it, that protects reporters, that lets you make appropriate decisions, that lets you warn people without kicking them, and then follow through, be seen following through, develop a reputation for following through. There's not a shortcut here. It's, you know, this is not happy advice. It's a lot of work. It's worth doing. Do the work. The more work you do, the more work you'll have to do, because more people will be comfortable coming to you, and that's a good thing until you burn out. That's a separate topic.
That's a separate panel.
Also make a distinction in the phrasing between it's not victim, call it reporter. The person that's reporting it. That way it doesn't even have to be the person it was directed at.
Someone could have seen something.
Someone could have seen something happening and just said, hey, this isn't great. And that's enough. That's helpful. That allows us as community organizers to establish patterns of actions. It allows us to go to that person and be like, hey, that thing you did wasn't cool. Fix it.
So I think these two questions are actually related a little bit, which is sometimes people are coming not just with harassment problems or really big social issues, but just there's a thing and I don't know if I have the power to change it. I don't know if this is the direction that my community is going. I don't have a good platform to have that discussion. The model that I try to apply when I'm dealing with those things, if they even get brought to me, is to establish a pattern of saying, I'm going to listen to you. I don't have an opinion yet. I'm going to hear you and acknowledge that I've heard you and try to make sure that I understand you, and then understand if we're looking towards a path for change, understand if this is something that we're going to change. Did you just need somebody to listen to you? And know that you were heard and that it has been thought about, and then maybe the answer was no. But that can turn into a community crisis of existential direction. Like, do we want to be the game that does this? Do we want to be the community that addresses this thing if it were happening a lot in this way? And just being open and asking questions about it and trying to understand before you have an opinion, even if you totally have an opinion, is a good place to start, because it makes people feel more comfortable in saying, this isn't going to result in an action or reaction immediately. There's going to be a conversation where it's appropriate to have one. And maybe they've brought up something that nobody else has before. So it's a lot of work. You are not wrong, and there are not enough people doing it, and it's hard, and you have to realize that you're going to make the wrong decision sometimes. But if you are demonstrating that you're trying, people will be a lot more willing to come to you, and will be a lot more forgiving when you're like, you know what, I have no good decisions to make here. So let's pick the one that does the least harm. You've been raising your hand a lot.
Go!
So my question goes back to the if someone doesn't agree and you sort of encourage them to find another venue, what if you're the only venue in town and they would rather stay and be unhappy and spread that unhappiness than leave because they want to LARP and this is the only place to do it?
So ultimately, the needs of the many can outweigh the needs of the few or the one in that situation, in my opinion. If they can't make a decision that's good for them, we might have to make a decision that's good for the rest of the community. Yep. That's maybe not a popular opinion. I don't know.
But, if they're creating that much toxicity but themselves and causing it, and you've gone through a couple of
touch base. If I could put in a comment there, sometimes it's not a matter of toxicity. Sometimes it's a matter of a genuine disagreement about how things should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are the really hard cases. Yeah. The ones when I talk about the existential crises, it has always been a disagreement about how we should be doing things, and it's always been one where both sides had a perfectly good argument, and both sides were large.
But this is the decision that's been made. You're going to get on the boat or you're going to get off. I mean,
I do, in those situations, I try to ask, is there a way that I could say yes to this, or that we could agree to enable this or change this? Let's have a really hard discussion about it, understand what our guiding principles are, and where we want to end up, kind of philosophically, maybe not in implementation. And eventually, the reason you have a leader is somebody eventually is going to have to make a decision, and they may end up with half of the community going, well, that decision sucked, and I don't want to be part of it anymore.
But this is why we don't do consensus. Like, a lot of us don't deal. Though I love consensus, it's a really hard way to run a large community.
Someone has to make a decision, and that's the hardest part, is you're not going to please everybody. My goal is not to please everyone, so that works out all right. But I would prefer to be able to please everyone where I can, and I will put work into trying to do that as long as it makes sense. I will put work into trying to continue to involve people who are not 100% satisfied and give them ways to enable better satisfaction on their part, but eventually someone may have to make a hard decision.
And I think the thing that we're underscoring over and over again is do the work.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, it's work. It's hard
It is
work. It's
hard
emotional
work.
It's worthy work. It's the good work.
Like, you want to run a con, you want to run a Larp, you want to have fun with your friends, but then you find yourself in a position of doing work.
But it's worth it to build the community.
It is.
Yes.
It is worth it, but it's.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, so do we have anyone? You have a question. Sorry, I'm just making sure that we've hit everyone who has a question first. So.
I just want to clarify, you're not saying to help someone find another LARP who's been in a, say, an abusive situation?
No.
But if there's a community bad fit and it just doesn't seem like you're going to be able to make the changes that they need to have a community where they can contribute in a way they want and it's healthy, is there anything you can do?
Right, and the exit's been healthy.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
This is not I'm going to shove this
gonna
abuser
pass
off on
off to
another
somebody.
community.
Right.
No,
You
different
don't wanna do
question.
that to each other.
Different question.
And also pay a lot of attention to if this person's from a marginalized community. And if this is something that's, a thing that doesn't affect most of the people at your convention, but does affect this intersection of intersectionality. Does this affect this person because of this intersection of lack of privilege?
Yeah,
So fix your shit.
yeah, they may be the ones in the right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they may be absolutely right.
I can give a specific example to that. It was really sad. We had a person who was neurodiverse, just bothered people, like got a little too close to people or did things, and people just kept trying to make these reports about them as something, trying to get them removed, right? And well, what happened? There was nothing. They just didn't like them. They just didn't want to role play with them, and they just didn't want them around. And there was no specific incident. There was no assault. There was not even creepy behavior. There was nothing they could pin down. And this came from multiple people. Well, then these people started excluding this person from online role play and in-person role play, and then they started saying ugly things on social media channels about this person. And so I'm like, who I need to intervene on now is you guys, right? Because what you guys are doing is against the code of conduct for how we handle in a community, right?
And sometimes it's the game itself is not the right fit. So the game that we run, we do not discourage player versus player conflict. We don't actively encourage it, but we are going to support that as a system of conflict resolution. You may just need to go and, Joe McBad guy over there who's actually a PC, who's playing an antagonist character, you just may need, if it comes down to it, you need to PvP. That's the game we run. We are upfront about that, and there are some players in the LARP community, and this is totally their preference, is that they want no PvP in even in their campaign bot for LARP. Well, guess what? You show up on our site, in our community, we're gonna have, there may be PvP. I'm not saying it happens all the time, but there may be PvP that happens. And I want you to know that ahead of time. Like, I don't want you to jump up on you like, oh, you know, my friend just like hit me in the back and like put me down in the dirt. What is this? Well, that's
PvP.
This is
Well,
about communicating intent and being
Right.
clear
I was going
about
to say
things that aren't
transparency.
policy, yeah.
Transparency can help prevent some of these crises if you're transparent in your communications and your expectations of behavior and your policies for what will happen if this happens and what kind of game you're running.
Yes.
Right.
All those sorts of things, all that transparency up front does help a lot with mitigating the crisis, being proactive up front.
I'm actually going to ask, can I ask, I have not asked a single question,
know,
so I'm
Maury.
going to ask a question. I'm going to be going, and I'll get to, we'll hopefully get one more in, but this is a question I'm just interested in. It's going to jump back a ways. I want to know what the policy, so I am a big fan of restorative justice. I'm also a big fan of, I've had some incidents in which I have, now this person could have been lying to me, I don't know, but they have been banned from a community that they had never actually interacted with, based on something that they didn't know. They said they never had no idea what this was. And they asked, what can I do? How can I help? But they had nowhere to know even how to start. And the community didn't give them anything that gave them no directions. Just go away for a while and maybe you'll get better and maybe we'll let you back in. How do we take people who maybe have been banned, and that's a totally fine thing, that community decided that's what they needed to do, but if they are showing genuine that, how do we help bring people, should there be forgiveness? Should we be a carceral state in which we just throw people under the bus and even if they are working? So I'm just wondering, like, how do we handle that? We're talking about all these horrible serial abusers and stuff, but what happens if someone actually wants to change and feels they can't, that they have now been thrown and cast out of the Larp community forever? Sorry.
No, that's a very valid question.
Yeah.
Banning someone is a traumatic event in their life. It is absolutely, they're being cut off. Like, it's the Klingon, turn your back on them.
Right, yeah. Like,
It's
I had to do a
hard.
huge amount of emotional counseling with this person for, like, months.
Yeah.
So,
And there is not an easy answer.
Okay.
There really isn't. You know, we don't take banning lightly at all, and it's hard, and it is a ruling without a justice system. I don't know that I have an answer.
right? That, I'm just trying to read this.
And sometimes I don't feel like a game owner, I feel like a detective, because I'm collecting narratives from all of these different sources, trying to find the one kernel of truth that may be hidden in 15 different people telling me what's going on. It's never something you do lightly.
Yeah.
I'm saying, I'm pretty sure that this was legitimate.
Sure.
I'm just saying, like,
right.
but what happens if the person seems to possibly be acting in good faith now?
This comes to mind. Don't have super hard and fast rules about things. I mean, obviously, code of conduct, but don't have super hard and fast policies. Like, don't tie your hands by saying, well, once we ban someone, there's no, there's no steps past that. Be willing to treat each incident as its own thing. If somebody 5 years later says, hey, I know you banned me 5 years ago, I think I've demonstrated some stuff, be willing to talk to them, be willing to reopen the case, do the work in that situation also. And maybe the answer is, you haven't, though.
Right.
And maybe the situation is great, like you'll come back, but we're going to keep a super tight eye on you, and any mistake and you're gone, and good luck at that point.
And maybe the answer is that the community was traumatized by your actions, and the community is not a good fit for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That could be it. We personally, banning is like the very last resort. And usually when we do that, it's because there's something that is not going to be fixable, or that we do not have the tools to fix it. We will acknowledge that. But we do, we make sure to kind of tell people, remember, this is not a court of law.
Right.
You have entered the court of public opinion, unfortunately.
Right.
And if you are genuinely interested in trying to repair your relationship with the community, who are really the ones that were probably harmed as part of this, it's not me,
Right,
your
right.
game organizers personally, it's everyone else. This is going to be hard work. We cannot guarantee success on this. If we give you an opportunity to re-enter and try to form good and better relationships, this is not going to be a fun experience. And you need to probably do some things that are going to make you really uncomfortable and have a conversation that is not going to be entirely positive. And is that something you're willing to try? If you're willing to try it and it seems like there's a chance of success, we will attempt to help facilitate, but everyone has to understand it might not work and we may have to come to a point where we acknowledge that. We haven't had a situation where that's happened yet, honestly. But if it did, that's kind of our plan is like, look, we're not going to say, we've unbanned you, everything is fine, it's great. Now you need to start a conversation with the rest of the community and be willing to hear what they have to say.
Which is honestly part of restorative justice.
Mm-hmm. It is. You need to have that person brought into the conversation.
So I was going to say that ask the question earlier is one of the things you can try to facilitate when people come to you before it gets to that point is you can say, do you want to have a conversation? I will function as a mediator for you but the biggest thing and if you are willing to, not the victim, the person who reported may not be willing to do that yet, but if you get if they are willing to and the other person is willing to, like just sitting the people down in a mediated discussion is a great thing, and it's that's why organizing LARPs has got such a crazy number of skill sets and hats that you have to put on because of that. I'm a long time in education. First, when you have something like that, I always try to make the analogy of like you got dismissed from a job, or you got broken up with when you still cared. Not every breakup, right? And so this thing happened to you, right? And so you have to own and acknowledge it, even if you don't believe it's true, and that the ex is saying you were this or the job thought you were doing, right? And so sort of proactively saying, I made a mistake, or we had a disagreement at a previous con or thing that I went to, and I've reflected on what that is and what my behavior, and I've looked into, and I'm working on ways to make sure that I am engaging in these code of conduct that are here. I can work on other community things where I'm speaking up and being visible in positive ways, and people start having interactions with me, not necessarily in this community, but adjacent to it,
adjacent communities.
That are in positive ways. Time is a real thing. Once something gets 2 years in the past or so, people start to go, okay, that they've had a time to demonstrate change. But it's the way they react to something that is the biggest predictor, right? If somebody says, hey, some people were uncomfortable around you because you were really aggressively flirting, right? And if you go, ooh, gosh, I didn't mean to make anybody feel uncomfortable. Let me start to check myself. And can you help me understand where the line is? Because I'm just a really ebullient and extroverted person, and especially if I've had a beer, not me personally, but I may start to lose where some of these things are, and my boundaries are not the same as other people's boundaries. So can you guys actually help me understand, calibrate? Yeah.
But also in all of this discussion about bringing someone back into the fold, I am going to use the word victim here. The person affected by
gets to
the
decide.
harasser or the abusers has they are in no way required to. They should not, they owe the other person nothing. Zero zilch. Nada. There's nothing that they owe the other person. They don't owe a conversation. They don't owe an explanation. They don't even owe the other person the right to apologize to you. They are well within their ability to set personal boundaries to say never, ever, ever speak to me again. This will never be rescinded. Hallelujah.
And that was the incident in Intercon's case. that I was referring to earlier, which was specifically that, where the aggressor, was trying to reach out to apologize and violated this person never wants to talk to you.
Ever.
We had to force that,
and
ever.
it's not okay for either of those parties to put organizers in the position of forcing one
Right.
side or the other to
Right.
do that.
Totally agree.
And that's a boundary we have to place to say, like, we're not gonna say, yeah, we're gonna invite you back into the community and this person's gonna have to be okay with it. You also have to be sensitive to the fact that one, just like I said before, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the fewer than one. It kind of goes the other direction too, and it's up to you as a leader to make the decision about what you want the character of your community to be, with being sensitive and proactive, and there's no right answer for every situation, and people who want to enter that restorative justice system also have to come into it with the expectation that that answer may be, because we care about everyone in the community, we don't have a good way to make this work out. And they need to be able to accept, we're very sorry, but no as an answer as well. And it is not a judgment about your character, but it's a judgment about the community at large.
I think I'm going to end there because that was a great ending. Let's thank our awesome panelists.